Are you worried about a gap tooth right in front of your front area? Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So guys, I'm very sure that you or your friends, you might have definitely noticed somewhere that there are a couple of people who actually have a gap between their central incisors. The incisors being the tooth, the upper front tooth will be showing a gap. Now that's an aesthetic problem, right? Some of them will have it from the time they are born. It might be seen from a very young age itself. Whereas some of them, they might have it only later on in their life. So now why do you have this gap in between the front tooth? And what is it called? What are the causes? And how can it be treated? Let's just find out. So the gap between the front tooth, the upper front tooth, is called as a diastema, and it's very commonly seen. So it happens because of overhanging or a high-rise tissue somewhere near the frenum, which in turn is very thick and the tissue is wider. So what happens is the two central incisors or the upper front tooth, because of the thickness and resilience of this tissue and because of its overhanging, is pushed towards the sides, creating a small gap there. The gap can be very tiny, like very minimal, or it can even extend up to 2 mm, 3 mm, etc. So a person who has this can have a lot of causes, the cause being this most of the time. Along with that, there are some other causes, like if the patient is having an impacted tooth, that is a tooth which is present inside the gums and cannot be seen outside. So if that is present inside the gums, then what happens is clinically we don't see it, but then because that tooth is actually present there, the next tooth buds will start forming adjacent to that, thereby creating a gap which is clinically visible. If you have a missing teeth, sometimes some of the patients will have a missing central incisor or a lateral incisor, which is like very common. And in that time, what happens is the jaw is quite big. It is supposed to accommodate these many teeth, but when one of the tooth is missing, that can cause a gap there. Sometimes this gap is not there in the beginning and it forms as you age. So that time there can be another reason, like there can be a tooth loss because of any of having a grossly decayed tooth, or because of any of the reason. If you're going to miss a tooth, then what happens is the dentition will start shifting to this side or that side wherever there is place, because of which there can be a gap that is formed. So these are most of the time anatomical, but there is also a pathological cause for forming of this gap, and that can be because of the gum diseases. Whenever there is an underlying or prevailing gum disease, there will be bone loss, and because of the bone loss, the tooth, like I've already explained, is present inside a socket, and around which you have the bony socket, the tooth, and around which you have the gums. So whenever the gums are not healthy, the tooth will have bone loss, and over some time it's going to have a shaky tooth because of the bone loss. The tooth does not stay sturdy, because of which there will be a shift, or the tooth can tilt to one side, thereby causing a gap between the adjacent tooth and this one. So this is a pathological cause, and in this case, as you all know, the treatment protocol remains the same. If the cause has to be removed, only then this pathological movement of the tooth can be corrected. So let's talk about what are the treatment protocols available in case of a diastema. Do you think that it's going to go off on its own? In children, if you observe, when they have the milk teeth, most of the time they will have a lot of gaps. That is very much anatomical and it is required. Whenever those gaps are present, it is good because the permanent tooth that is going to come are going to be larger in size. They need that much space. So if your child is having a dentition which is having gaps, that is good for them. Whereas in case of a child who has a teeth all aligned to each other, very close to each other, then they might end up having a malocclusion, for which you'll have to get a treatment, an orthodontic treatment done. So in case of diastema also, the diastema or the spaces which we see in case of children are going to go away on its own, but in case of adults, no, it's not going to go away. Now, like I already told, if the reason is gum disease and bone loss, then it needs to be treated accordingly. If the other reason, like the high-raised frenum, or it's because of any shifting of the tooth because the tooth is missing, in that case you need to get the tooth replaced so that the ideal harmony of the tooth structure is maintained, the balance is maintained in the oral cavity. If it is anatomical, like from the time your permanent tooth has evolved and the gap is present from that time, then there are some laser surgeries which can be done. When you remove this high-raised frenulum, tissue, the thicker tissue, then the gaps might get closed on its own if it's a very small gap. But in case of larger gaps, which is like more than 2 mm or so, then you will have to get a orthodontic or the braces treatment done. So your orthodontist is going to advise you for the small surgery if required. If not, they are going to have put certain appliances in your mouth, and after the ortho treatment is over, they are going to give you a permanent retainer, either the one which is fixed behind your tooth, which is not seen outside, or they might also give a retainer which needs to be worn in the night time. But this totally depends on each patient, the amount of gap, and how much of the jaw size. It depends on so many factors. So treatment protocol varies from person to person. But as you all know, diastema is not something, most of the time it is not something pathological. It's just having an aesthetic value. If you are born with it, that is how you are, and you are used to it. You don't really matter, it doesn't really matter to you. It's a very small gap in sometimes, and it doesn't really bother you. There are so many celebrities who actually have diastema, and they are okay with it. So if you do not want to get any correction, then that's also absolutely fine. Unless you want to get it treated properly, you can ignore it as well. You just need to, like every other person, just smile and be confident. That's all it takes. One of the most commonest thing about this diastema is that it runs in families. So if it is running in your family and you want to prevent it for your child, what can be done is you can take the child for an orthodontic intervention at the earliest. So it can be prevented most of the time when that's the reason. And by giving some ortho functional appliances which will help in having a aesthetic smile for the kid. Now, if it's because of the functional issue, that is the gums and the bone loss, then definitely it needs to be treated. Your dentist has to be consulted for the same. Please don't leave it as such, because this the gap that is formed here today will be formed somewhere else later on. It will be a constant process, and the entire harmony or the balance of your tooth structure, their alignment, placement, it will affect with your chewing habits, and it actually will disrupt the entire oral cavity habitat. So in that case, you need to get a treatment done. If that's not the case, it's all left to you. Just be happy with whatever smile you have. Be confident. If you don't want to get it treated, it is also completely alright. That's all for now. Bye.